I'm Alan Benzing, a former aircraft commander of the B-29 Superfortress Fifi, one of only two B-29s that remain operational. The B-29s were responsible for finally bringing World War II to the end in August of 1945. I'm here in Fifi's unique and rather complicated cockpit, and I'd like to share with you vintage interview clips of Colonel Charles Phillips, who you learned about in the preceding video. These segments were filmed in 1994 for a presentation on the B-29's contribution to the war in the Pacific Theater. These short video segments will help you better understand Colonel Phillips' role as aircraft commander of several B-29 bombers and as squadron operations officer. First, let's hear Colonel Phillips discuss the need for U.S. forces to take the Northern Marianas Islands of Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, and finally Iwo Jima in hard-fought battles. This provided a foothold for air bases within B-29 range of Japan in what would become the final year of the war.
They prepared on each of these airfields, there were 5 of them, 8,500-foot runways, which are pretty modest by today's thinking, but that's what we had, and we used most all of that footage on these heavyweight takeoffs. The B-29 would weigh 70 tons, 140,000 pounds, and you always hoped that every one of the engines would perform well, because the takeoff was the most critical part of the entire mission. Iwo Jima is probably one of the most critical pieces of territory that you could have thought of if you were flying missions like we were in the spring of 1945. To us, it meant a sanctuary for a B-29 in trouble, either due to fuel or mechanical trouble. He could go there and land.
It had a well-trained crew of 11, could carry 10 tons of bombs with multiple 50 caliber Browning machine guns remotely controlled through a complex gun system. Dropping the bombs from 25,000 feet meant they could be blown off target by the extremely strong crosswinds, often missing the critical Japanese war production facilities. Curtis LeMay devised a strategy in late February 1945 requiring B-29 crews to fly at much lower altitudes, dropping incendiary bombs, producing massive fires which caused devastating destruction. The goal was to force Japan's surrender. These missions began on March 9, 1945, and Colonel Phillips was one of the first crews to demonstrate that this strategy might indeed hasten the end of the war.
I can remember that briefing because we all sat in a big Quonset hut, and when we heard the bombing altitudes, at first there was a silence throughout the hall, and then a great gasp from all of the crew members as they realized what they had just heard.
The plan was not without controversy. Many crews worried about their safety as the low altitude and reduced armament could cause injuries or cause the downing of more aircraft and the loss of American crew members. But Colonel Phillips was a leader in risking the odds and implementing General LeMay's strategy.
On that first mission, there were 300 B-29s, which took off from Guam and Tinian and Saipan. Here we would be flying with no lights showing, in the dark, with just individual aircraft, no formation. We're all going toward the same place at the same time. We saw pieces of houses like windows and doors actually going by the airplane at around 8,000 feet. I've never been in worse turbulence in an aircraft anywhere that was stronger than that night, March 10th, over Tokyo. I thought the wings were surely going to be just ripped off the aircraft. The bonfire that was going on down there on the surface was throwing heat upward, but the turbulence was from that heat rising. And you could not help but sympathize with the people on the ground. There were thoughts about the folks on the ground and what they had to be suffering. In our first firebombing of Tokyo, it was so bad that many Japanese themselves properly figured that it was the beginning of the end for them.
Headlines read, "Tokyo burning as 17 square miles around the Emperor's palace burned, but purposely leaving the palace untouched. These missions brought the possibility of victory ever closer, but it was with great risk to our crews. The burning of Japanese communities continued for some time, and it had become controversial at home and certainly in Japan. By July 1945, it was decided that the only alternative to continued loss of life in combat with Japan was to use the newly developed nuclear bomb. And so, on August 6th, the B-29 Enola Gay, and on August 9th, the B-29 Boxcar unleashed their atomic weapons. On August 15, 1945, Japan's Emperor Hirohito finally announced unconditional surrender, ending World War II. The year 2025 will mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. 400,000 servicemen gave their lives in the fight for freedom in almost 4 years of combat. We honor those men and women for their dedication on this anniversary. You can read Colonel Phillips' authentic and very interesting first-person account from the viewpoint of an aircraft commander and squadron operations officer and see the many iconic historical photographs in his book. It is titled Rain of Fire, B-29s over Japan, which was endorsed by General Curtis LeMay with a foreword by General Jack Canton. This 80th anniversary edition is available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and as a B-29 pilot, I'm always interested in learning more about that history. So this is my go-to book to find the details about the crews and the missions that they flew. I'm Alan Benzing. Thank you for listening to this remarkable memorial video and clips from the 73rd Bomb Wing, which honors one of our valiant members who fought in World War II and beyond.